Rock and roll is a form of pop culture that originally originated in the United States in the late 40s to the early 50s. The root of it, however, can be traced back centuries to Africa and Europe. Rock and roll music has a strong beat and instrumental of guitar, double bass, and drums. Today I'll be discussing how rock and roll became such a key industry in Australian pop culture, how rock and roll has changed from 1945 till now, and finally how rock and roll has contributed to Australian identity. Rock and roll originated in Australia in the early 1950s, also known as OT rock, as it came in waves. There were three distinct waves of Australian rock. The first wave covered 1955 to 1963. It had a strong American and British style to it. This wave brought the likes of Johnny O'Keefe. The second wave was 1964 to 1969. These 5 years was direct influence by the Beatles. This wave was seeing the likes of the Easy Beats and the Bee Gees. One thing which seen rock and roll became significant in this era was a weekly magazine, Go Set. It was aimed at youth and young adults and became an extremely influential publication during this time. The third wave was from 1970 to 1975. It started the pub rock era. The biggest rock and roll band to come out of this was AC/DC. Something which caused rock to be significant during this time was a popular musical brand called The Countdown. It gave a platform for Australians to watch each week on the ABC network, whilst promoting Australian rock. Rock and roll started out as a singer with their instruments. This music would have a strong beat. True rock hasn't changed much over the years. What it has done, though, is incorporate different genres that fall into rock categories, such as punk rock and indie rock. The biggest change from the 50s to now would be the technology. In today's music, there are computers and softwares to create music or a beat, and a lot of the rock has been edited to example this, as opposed to 60 years ago when rock was created with a singer, drummer, bass, and guitar. Rock and roll made a big impact on Australia. Music from the 50s was muchly whatever your parents liked, you did. When rock and roll evolved, it gave adolescents and adults the chance to embrace something different, something which was strong and never seen before, not only in the music but also shifted over the other aspects such as daily life, fashion, and attitude. It gave people a new way to express themselves and to be individual. As rock and roll grew, it went from being just music to being used in commercials, television, and even on films. With positively does come negative. Rock and roll did have the association with drugs and sex. A lot of the stars of this genre had the reputation as heavy drinkers and hardcore characters. This had taking drugs being acceptable and non-risk-taking. Unfortunately, over those years, many rock and roll museums succumbed to fatalities. In hindsight, this did change the way people idolized drugs from the 60s to 70s. It became less associated to rock and roll. Australia has a prosperous history in rock and roll music, an appreciation that most rock and roll originated from our countries. Australia contributed to the development of some of the rock and roll genres, as well as adding their own take on it, such as with pub rock and roll and indie rock and roll. It was extremely hard for Australia to initially break out in this genre outside of Australia. In the 1950s, Johnny O'Keefe was the first Australian to pave the way of other Australians to continue success. He was the first Australian to tour overseas and put Australian rock and roll and rollers on the map. Since then, some of the biggest rock and roll bands in history originated from the land down under. This in Dunes, INXS, Midnight Oil, Crowded House, and with more than 71 million in sales alone. AC/DC. Over the past 50 years, Australia has developed and continued to develop strong, influential rock and roll artists with remaining, if not gaining, popularity with each genre. Rock and roll contributed to pop culture heavily in the 1950s and 1960s in parts of the world. The rock and roll in the 50s were the dominant music area. It contributed to have a strong influence in today's times. Also, in recent years, the Hungry Jack's restaurant store kept the theme alive by decorating their stores as if they just stepped into the 50s. Another pop culture of rock and roll era country today is the rockabilly event. People get dressed up as they would in dance the night away to rock and roll music. In